You're listening to Kat Feeney on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland.
Well, from school lunches to homes, I wonder if you remember the National Housing Accord. What about first homeowners grants or the right to access your super to put down a deposit? Well, now you've got the new government's Help to Buy scheme, but what effect have any of these policies had on property prices and making your own home a more affordable option? Well, your next guest says the reason why we have unaffordable property is because no one really wants cheaper real estate. And the only long-term answer is to see property as somewhere to live rather than as an investment. Phil McGann is the Director of Claritude Financial Planning here in Brisbane. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Kat. Thanks for that introduction. That sums it up pretty well.
What do you mean no one wants cheaper property? Don't people want to have a home to live and they can afford?
They do. As a concept, it sounds lovely, and politicians love talking about housing affordability and saying it's great for the younger people to buy houses. But you go and ask anyone in your office here, anyone out on South Bank walking along, how about if we have your house prices 20% cheaper tomorrow? Is it a good idea? No one would say that is a good idea. John Howard famously said about 20-odd years ago he'd never been stopped by a punter at his electorate saying, John, I'm very unhappy. My houses are 20% higher than they were a year ago. So that's not what really they're getting to the crux of. It sounds like a great idea. We want everyone to be able to afford housing at a right level and getting into the market, as we all enjoy. But the only way you can do that, unless you see prices actually come right off or incomes go up very high, you can't have it both ways. So for houses to be affordable, you need cheaper houses. And that's just not the way. What the government is trying to do with these grants, and they've been around for a long time, is adding more money into the pool. They're actually sort of adding to the demand side. But really what they need to be looking at is probably the supply side. Or working together, releasing of more land in capital cities and actually have better planning decisions in capital cities, local governments, state governments. But it's a big mismatch. It's a bit of a mess.
I mean, it feels like every government has its own policy agenda, obviously. That's
Sure.
The business of being in government. And housing is a part of that business. I remember previous government's home savings maximiser policy, which basically let you start a savings account that had a lower tax rate and you could deposit into that account and it would accrue a particular rate of interest. The idea being that would help you save for a deposit. Can you give me an understanding of what the policy is currently?
Right. There's a few different ones around. In Queensland, where we sit, the state government has got a number of first home buyer guarantees and grants and trying to get people into new housing and existing housing. Families, single parents, those sorts of ideas, let you have a smaller deposit and all the rest. But again, it's all on the demand side. The federal government, in the recent election, came up with the idea of the basically a home equity scheme. And what they are trying to do is replicate what goes on in WA, South Australia and Tassie. At the present time, they have something similar on a state government level. We don't have that here. But what they're really saying is we'll let you the government will help you buy into the home. And the government will lend you or own equity in the property up to 40% of a new home and 30% of an existing dwelling. Again, it's adding to the demand side, not the supply side. So that's what we've sort of got at the moment. So these things have been around for a long while, and you'd have to argue, has it really addressed the underlying issue of the housing affordability in Australia?
Well, let's take a look at the equity example you've just offered us. If it's a federal version of a policy that's already been in play in other state jurisdictions, what impact have we seen in Tasmania or WA?
They have had some good things, but it's not a big enough scheme to actually do any good. As an example, the federal government announced in the election campaign, but haven't fleshed it out just yet. We'll probably get more details next year and in the proper budget in May. But basically, they were going to limit this to 10,000 people a year could buy into that. Now,
nationwide. This is the home equity
This is
scheme.
the federal government one.
Okay.
So 10,000 nationwide, that's not a huge amount when you think it through, when we've got a population in Australia about 25 mil. So you need to actually do more on that side, but trying to do more than that, it costs a lot of money to actually come up with this. The government allocated in the recent budget $350 million. Now, a lot of money, but it's not a huge amount of money when you're talking about prices in Brisbane up around that 700,000, 800,000 mark.
Who might qualify for this scheme, the federal scheme?
So basically what we do know at the present time, and hopefully it'll be fleshed out a bit more as we go on, who it's going to qualify for is for single people up to $90,000 income, and for couples $120,000 income. And then what you need to do is you actually do have to have at least a 2% deposit. So you actually have to save that up.
2%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only a 2% deposit, which is pretty good. And the government will step in and actually guarantee the rest of the deposit, so you're not paying mortgage insurance to your bank. But also they'll take up to a 40% equity interest in the property. But they're going to have limits on what the value of the properties will be.
So what would that be?
Well, in Brisbane, it's $650,000. So, not the inner areas, but some of the outer suburbs.
And does it suggest, I mean, and again, as you said, the details sort of come, but is it a standalone dwelling, a house, or could it be an apartment, townhouse? We don't know.
We don't know,
Okay.
but highly likely it will be all of the above, and we'll get the further details to sort of see how it will flesh out. Look, the idea seems okay, very much like the idea from the previous government of tapping into your super. But again, it's all on the demand side. And really, you need to address the supply side, I think about saying.
And was there anything in and around age? I know feedback that comes through this radio station a lot is when people hear first home buyers, and there seems to be an assumption made that it's younger people when that often isn't the case at all.
No, from my understanding, there's no age limit on it, but it's really a case of they will partner up with banks. The government will go guarantor with you with a bank to actually, when you're applying for the loan. So at a certain level, you need to actually have a certain income to apply and get the loan. The banks can't discriminate on age, but they might find other ways to discriminate, and they won't sort of really let you in on it, so to speak. But from my understanding, they're happy enough to actually extend this out to all age groups. So that's a positive. But whether someone in their early 60s who's about to retire could get one of these, I don't know. It might be a hard ask to get that from the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, that's interesting, because if you are about to retire and maybe you've been renting and you don't want to carry a massive mortgage through retirement by the same token, you want
Yes,
a
it's
lot to
hard one.
weigh up. Okay.
Again, it's a very difficult concept to get, but as we've spoken about previously as well, Kat, the big arbiter of how well you do in retirement is whether you own your home, because that's a big cost. Whether you're renting in retirement is very, very difficult. It takes up so much of your disposable income. So if you can actually own your home or on the way to doing that, that makes a big difference to your lifestyle in retirement.
Okay. And now just a reminder, of course, Phil McGann is with you. He's with Claritude Financial Planning, and this is a conversation, general in nature. So if you're really thinking about making some big financial decisions, please do consider speaking with a qualified professional to receive personalised advice tailored to your situation. Phil's here to talk with you about the policy settings that concern first home buyers here in Queensland. If that's the federal government scheme, you alluded to the fact the state government has a few
They've got a few different
ideas as well.
I had a bit of a look before I came on air. The state government has actually had first home grants, first home guarantees, and it's all to do with trying to encourage people to get new or existing property, but primarily new property. And my understanding was the grants are about $15,000 or a bit higher, but trying to get people into the market. So again, that's a bit different because they're addressing both the demand side, but also the supply side if they're looking for new homes. So if they're trying to encourage people to get into new properties, well, it stimulates the property industry and for jobs and those sorts of things.
So we'll only help you if you're buying a new home.
Yes, for one of
needs
those,
to be built.
my understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
So look, there's a few, again, ideas around, but it really is an issue to do with what I feel, housing as accommodation versus housing as a financial asset and investment.
Yeah.
And we're very much tailored towards that in Australia and the way the taxation system works. The negative gearing is one aspect of it, but I'd argue the capital gains tax is a bigger issue than that.
Now, capital gains tax, you hear that term bandied about a lot. I feel like I'm pretty sure I know what it means. It basically means, as I was just about to say,
yes, basically,
just remind me what I was saying about
what
that.
You were saying.
Phil, thank
So
you.
basically, capital gains tax, when you're buying an asset, you can basically, there's a cost base of that asset, and when you go to sell that property, as an example, in the future, you need to adjust and you have to pay capital gains tax on the gain. But what the government did a number of years ago, previous governments, probably about 15 odd years ago now, the capital gains tax you pay is only half the gain of the property. in this case. So it makes property are very much a financial asset for a lot of people out there. You're really effectively paying income tax on your income at full rates, but on capital gains, only about half of that. It gets a little bit convoluted, but that's the general gist of it. And so a lot of people are buying property as an investment, and that's reasonable on one level. But also the housing sector in Australia, your home is exempt from the assets test for the age pension. Should it be? Should it not be? Those sorts of things. But we need those discussions to happen because eventually the government has only got so much money to provide the services we're looking for, and they've got to get it from somewhere.
Phil McGann, there's so much to think about there, but you've been a real help in helping us at least understand in a bit greater detail the ideas behind some of the policies that we have on the table. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate.
Phil McGann with you, Director of Claritude Financial Planning.
On your radio and online.
At home or on the road.
This is ABC Radio.